Mark, many thanks indeed for that amazing presentation. Sorry you got chopped off just at the end of it, but it was so fascinating. I thought we needed to continue with it. I don't know if Victoria Branovich has rejoined the conversation, but Victoria, if you're here with us, could you unmute? And you were going to ask about emissions from the from anaerobic digestion. You know, what happens to the CO2 there?
Yes, indeed. So that's it's important to understand how fugitive release of greenhouse gases could result from anaerobic digestion. As I outlined earlier, and Plantlife this is not our core competency as an organization, as I'm sure you're well aware, but the specialists in anaerobic digestion, and I would defer to the Anaerobic Digestion and Biogas Association, ADBA, their recent presentation, which I referred to there. It makes a clear case that on all fronts, environmental and economic, anaerobic digestion is the go-to solution for organic wastes when we're addressing climate issues. So fugitive releases of carbon dioxide are an issue with composting. Fugitive releases of methane are a big issue when it comes to landfill. Both are addressed as best as can be with anaerobic digestion, and it shouldn't be in any way malodorous.
So, I mean, just to be clear, anaerobic digestion does result in some CO2 production, but I think you said in one of your slides that it's much easier to capture that CO2.
Yes, yes.
Brilliant, thanks. So can I turn to Lucy now? Lucy, you put your hand up first if you got a question for Mark.
Hi, Mark. Thanks very much. Very interesting.
Pleasure.
I'm the coordinator of the Community Land Advisory Service at Social Farms and Gardens. So we work a lot with community gardens and community farms, all of whom are managing spaces for themselves. Yeah, I was wondering about the level of investment that's required and whether something maybe smaller could be thought about, or if there's something out there already for you know, to be used on a smaller scale, because the appetite for it at a community level is huge, I think. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you, Lucy. And I think we're looking at that in two ways. So in the first instance, we're seeing in England that we're going to be asked to do the same things with our putrescible waste as Wales is already addressing. For that reason, we're expecting that, well, effectively a market is going to be created. There's going to be a new set of market forces, which will mean that either existing anaerobic digestion facilities will need to be enhanced or new ones will need to be built. We want to have the early upfront conversations with big waste disposal service providers like Biffa, Veolia, FCC Environmental and the like, so that when they are bidding, when they are responding to tenders, that they are factoring in the co-digestion possibility, potentially revolutionizing vegetation management and habitat management nationally and across the UK. So the economy of scale can be enjoyed, it's clear from financial analyses, for the bigger plants with the right size of catchment area to minimize the transport of biomass needed, the infrastructure needed for ensilement or storage, temporary storage. But then all of that seems to work best, you know, given a particular context, and that can be part of a business plan. When you're referring to the on-farm scale of anaerobic digesters, that has a number of barriers to it at the moment. The principal one being that road verge biomass is currently classified as a waste. And under the waste regulations, you need a waste carrier's license to transport it. And to put it through anaerobic digestion and to return that material to land, you need a special waste processing license, which can cost tens of thousands of pounds a year, I believe. That's what was quite, it presented quite a hurdle to trials in Lincolnshire, which was working with an on-farm anaerobic digestion facility, which had a temporary license to work with. So Plantlife are very interested in that arena, in understanding how smaller scale, perhaps sub 500 kilowatt anaerobic digestion plants, how they could be part of the solution with smaller catchments and tighter circling geographically of nutrients. We would love for that to be part of the solution for farming in general, mainstreamed as part of, and something incentivized even within environmental land management schemes as they roll out. So there are current hurdles, and it's harder to achieve. But if you're working purely from without agricultural residues, agricultural leftover material, and you're working purely with green space in the sense of parks and gardens, and let's say golf courses, then you're not subject to the same waste regulations as apply to the softer state of transport infrastructure. So you don't have to worry so much. So then what finances are in place? Well, currently we're working with a Swiss business school based in Lausanne, IMD. We're looking at green financing options for the bigger facilities, how ethically invested pension plans could provide the seed capital to set up the sorts of new facilities and invest in the new machines that are going to be required for this systemic change. But that doesn't help you. What would help you would be smaller scale seed funding in that way. That's something I don't know much about currently. That's something that we can call for. That's something that should be part of the solution. I agree. And I think RAP and ADBA are two key organizations to contact about that. There was seed funding for that some years back. Can it be rekindled? What shape will that take in the future? How can farmers be supported? Are all really vital questions. So I can't give you the direct answer to that, but what I hope I've done is I've given a broader answer which tries to encompass that, and certainly we're very keen to see that as a potential solution. So the very next thing I'm doing today is I'm actually getting in touch with some key contacts at ADBA. So all of these thoughts and ideas are hot off the press in terms of Plantlife, and what we're keen to do is seed those thoughts, just help that generation, help to generate that discussion, and collaborate in ways with people like yourselves and other people from different organizations with different responsibilities and duties to think through and work this problem.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Are you on mute, Pete?
Still on mute, Pete.
So I was just saying to M. Bose, sorry, I don't know your first name, if you could ask Mark your question.
Hi, Madeline. I am looking at this from the point of view of improving active travel access. So carrying on from highways, I just wondered if you could talk about the maintenance of verges related to a question of public health and equity of access to services, that this is not just access to the countryside, but it's also access to particularly in rural areas, to actually being able to go to the surgery or whatever it is.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. So it's part of our immediate countryside. It's part of our immediate semi-natural environment, really important in that way, really good for our health and well-being. But at the same time, active travel, by that I hope I'm understanding you correctly, that you're looking for modal change, you're looking for healthy habits, more walking, more cycling, and feeling like you can get out into a safer transport infrastructure.
Yes,
so it's more accessible. Yeah.
The point at which, for example, nature isn't neat type projects become brambles all over the path, and that you then can't get into town. Absolutely. without using your car.
And that's so vital, Madeline. Quite right. And it's a really healthy challenge, when we're thinking this through. And this is where that linear mosaic of a well-kept, well-tended, immediate edge to that carriageway is so important. It's a safe step over for someone with walking a dog when there's oncoming traffic, particularly on single carriage lanes. So that is absolutely vital. And Plantlife has always advocated that safety comes first, accessibility comes first. What we would hate to see would be asphalt or bonded surface, footpaths, expensive ones at that, right down the middle of our broadest verges, then not only disturbing that footprint, but then creating a requirement that either side of it, another meter should be maintained as a crew cut with a ride-on cylinder mower, for example. So what we're hoping is that a good, healthy balance can be struck between utility and biodiversity without making any compromises whatsoever on safety. And really, if biomass harvesting is used in this kind of stepped way, then it can be increased where it's required, it can be decreased where it's better, and potentially, poses less of a barrier to accessibility. And in that way, hopefully, we have something that pays for itself and is adaptable to the context, and key routes for the kind of use of the infrastructure can be adjusted accordingly with a cutting schedule.
Thank you.
Great.
I noticed that Rose had posted a question in the chat. Rose, would you mind unmuting yourself and asking Mark your question?
Yeah, and I was just wondering, like, I'm coming from local authority, and we're sort of thinking, we've been thinking about this for a while, because obviously, well, the argument we have at the moment, we only put in verges that we can leave the arisings on site because it's so expensive to remove them. And it turns out we don't actually compost them ourselves. We just collect green waste, and then it just gets dropped off and someone else deals with it from there. But yeah, so we're thinking about it, but the practicalities of how we collect it and where it goes as well. So I'm just interested if there is any facilities already in Wales that we could, in theory, drop them off to.
Yes, short answer, Rose, yes. So if you go to adbioresources.org, adbioresources.org, that's the website for the Anaerobic Digestion and Bioresources Association, one of a number of resources online which could give you a map of where operational AD plants are and where they are planned, where they're being constructed. There are certain requirements for AD plants to take grass as opposed to other forms of organic waste. So that might limit the number of plants that can take this sort of green waste. But Plantlife will be campaigning towards perhaps more general acceptance of cut herbage as part of climate and biodiversity solutions. And yes, basically there are hybrid solutions. We shouldn't rule those out. So in Dorset County Council, for example, they have switched entirely to cut and collect across their road verge network, but they are not composting or anaerobically digesting the cuttings. They are creating rot down piles at the back verge where it's safe to do so, but they're still enjoying a cost reduction to that service provision because they've effectively transported the fertility from the edge and the middle of the verge to the back verge. That fertility is used by the hedgerow to grow and creates tall herbs, fertilizes tall herbs at the back verge, but that's then not close to the carriageway. That's then very much less a risk to visibility and sightlines and the pullover zone. And effectively that short distance transportation of fertility is creating less of a need for mowing in the area that needs to be mown for safety. So that's a hybrid solution, but we can improve on that by making use of the nutrients, the biomass, the energy that is present in this green and growing growth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. We're getting a bit short on time. We've got two questions. First one from Sorrel, and then I hope we've got time to answer Jill Jackson's question about the local AD plant. But Sorrel, can I turn to you first?
Yeah. No, it was just a very quick add-on to what Madeline was saying, that actually from a pollinator perspective, having that 1 meter close mown high maintenance kind of edge is actually better for a pollinator anyway, because it keeps them away from the heavy metals and things that are coming off road pollution. So the recommendation is to have that 1 meter to keep a carriageway clear, and even 2 meters where it's a really busy road. So having that edge is good management, both from a public transport and point of view, but also from a biodiversity point of view as well.
Very good point, Sorrel. I think, yes, that in the scientific literature, the drop-off is a very steep curve, isn't it, in terms of pollutants, their deposition coming away from the road verge. That meter makes all the difference. But of course, that meter, that will be a certain habitat type on salted routes. It's where salt-tolerant plants might grow. It's where compaction and disturbance resistance plants might be, where more weedy or ruderal kind of annuals grow rather than perennials. So it's a different kind of habitat stripe, if you like, but it could also be a flowering lawn. And that's relevant to green spaces elsewhere, parks and gardens. There might be areas that you do want to keep reasonably short, like dog exercise areas or picnic areas, but they need only be mown in low fertility situations once every 6 to 8 weeks. And then it's the kinds of flowers that have evolved to cope with grazing that prosper. So it's the clovers, the trefoils, the bedstraws. They will thrive, self-heal, yarrow. They're all top pollinator, nectar and pollen providers, but what they will lack is the structure and the herbage to feed the caterpillars and to provide places for fauna, invertebrates to hibernate and evade predators and that side of things. So striking the right balance, striking a compromise between short, longer, and left alone for a whole season, maybe left to stand through winter and cut every other year. Those parallel stripes are the best solution for wildlife, not just invertebrates and pollinators, but also for vertebrates, small vertebrates, and their predators too. So we're supporting everything with the green keystones all the way up to the apex predators, if you like.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Mark. Just quickly before we have to go, Jill Jackson, would you mind making your point to Mark about the problem with your local AD plant?
Yeah, I can, but I'm afraid I've got to go in about 2 minutes for another meeting. So, yeah, I just made the comment that, I mean, this is a number of years ago, and I approached our local AD plant. They were very negative and lukewarm about taking grass verge cuttings. I know for some of us who've been around a while, we had the Combine project, which then Lincolnshire took that on to take the more woody and variable vegetation, and particularly if you're doing a late cut, probably the AD plants are taking nice lush material that's taking at its peak growth. And we're trying to say a lot of our cuts, we want to be taking it often at the end of the summer when it's gone a little bit more woody, and also the potential risk of rubbish and soil, and there was a general we don't think we want it. So I just thought I'd mention it. It may be, sure, it can be resolved, but that has to be just recognised as an issue. But I have to go.
Of course. Yes, Jill, really quickly, yes. And of course, those biomasses that are late season cut, not so green and lush, they have more lignin in, and that needs cracking with perhaps microwaves or hydrothermal treatment. So it's about a precursory step in the AD process. That's beyond Plantlife's expertise, but working in partnership with waste disposal authorities, waste disposal service providers, anaerobic digestion facility owners, then building in that ability, not necessarily having to use expensive enzymes, but using mechanical and thermal practice can actually start to make the late season or less frequently cut and unfertilized herbaceous growth more digestible. And yes, there are some dedicated AD plants for, AD of potato peelings in a potato farmer, situation, for example, where putting anything else in would give it indigestion. So that's to be understood, that's to be respected. But I guess there's a huge opportunity, we would contend, in the marketplace for AD and organic waste disposal for the generalist, and the technology now exists, I've been informed, to balance feedstocks dynamically so that you can regulate methanogenesis, the generation of methane, and do that in a way that achieves better economy, better efficiency.
No, that's really positive. I'm really glad to hear that. Anyway, thanks very much. I'm afraid I have to go.
Okay, Jill, thank you.
Right, thanks. Right.
I was going to say thanks to everybody for coming along today, and particularly to Mark for an absolutely fascinating and information-packed presentation. As I said, I'll post the video and of the initial presentation and this discussion on the YouTube channel. So thanks once again to everybody, and I hope to see you very soon at our next webinar. Thanks again, and bye for now.